And I think when someone goes to a training or they read a book, they can take monumental strides forward in their thinking. Paradigms can be busted, like you were talking about. Concepts can be understood that weren't understood before, but those paradigm shifts and those concepts require soft skills in order to pass on to other people.
That's it.
Those are the people skills, those soft people skills that can only be learned by actual practice, like you're talking about.
Hey there, guys. Welcome back to the H3X Podcast, where I, Mark Gehring, together with your host, Dave Miller, we explore the head, the heart, and the hands of the multiplying church and our leaders. And, that's our tagline there. Today, we want to talk about that multiplying church. And there's a phrase that we will sometimes use, Dave, that the local church, well, we just say the church, but the local church is the reset button of the kingdom. And that's kind of a loaded phrase. What does that phrase mean to you, Dave?
Well, in essence, to get to the very core point of it is, every time that we establish a local church, we're going back to a 0 to 1 community that then has local ownership of the core task in the geographic region or the segment in which they're planted. And that means that then you have to take the priesthood of the believer and put it as the primary purpose of the people who are in that church. And they begin to be trained, held accountable, and encouraged to live out the life of a disciple maker within that body. And then from out of that body in the region area segment that they're planted, like they're the owners, the responsible party for that area. And so every time we plant a church, we're resetting that kingdom influence to get started in the lives of the next generation that'll be raised up, and then to hopefully further generations down the line.
That's good. Yeah, I think in that phrase, local owners of that core missionary task, the word we're scratching at today is ownership. And what is it about church as God's design for empowering and equipping, both of those words, empowering disciples that say, hey, this is yours, take it, run with it, and then equipping. What is the process of church itself that actually through doing church, disciples are equipped with what they need to take ownership? And so that's more than just a phrase. There's actually the priesthood, God's design of disciples making disciples, of taking back our role in the kingdom that I actually am more and more convicted cannot happen fully until, and I think there's other parts that can contribute. So I'm not saying this is the only, but it can't happen fully until church is a part of the training process.
I would even further say you can't raise up the leaders that we're looking for until leaders are given an opportunity to not only see leadership or to just even watch the model, but they have to participate. Leaders have to have a environment to where that crucible is put into their life, and that crucible, leadership crucible, where leaders are really formed and the real skills of leadership are honed. The character of a leader is honed, the reactions, the love, the word, all these, the head, heart, hands, things that we talk about all the time. Those can't be formed unless someone is engaged in and has a responsibility for people. And so the local church just provides a great opportunity for people to say, yes, I will take responsibility. And that responsibility has real life consequences and real life opportunities week in and week out. And that responsibility plus people plus continual accountability, real life accountability, is a perfect setup to really train leaders on how to lead people.
Yeah, as I was processing through this topic ahead of us hitting record, I was writing out some thoughts, and I wrote this phrase: rapid mobilization into action provides experience, and leading others amplifies their leadership giftings or wirings faster than solitary study. And I think that's my way of saying what you said, that it's in the quick hands-on engagement with these skills and tools and process that it gives that emerging leader the right kind of experience, and it helps us identify the right kind of leaders. And so this conversation could, for me, end up communicating like a binary, that there's no value for other ways of doing this, which is like we're familiar with and do event training. I personally still utilize and see the value of event trainings in identifying leaders, raising them up. In fact, we're in the middle of an online training right now, a 4-week training. But after that 4-week training, the next step is gathering them together for church. And so we're going to quickly identify who's ready to learn this stuff, who's ready to multiply and give it away, and equip them in that release of priesthood. And some of that's going to even come as they begin to be a part of this church experience that they may not even realize they're getting that. They may not even realize all of the ways that we're confronting the release for baptism and the release for the Lord's Supper, and what does it mean to appoint elders, and some of those questions that only come out academically and theoretically when you're in a training, and you can even begin to confront some of those paradigms. But there's a full release of confidence and like ownership. So that's the word today, is ownership, when that's actually happening in church.
And I think when someone goes to a training, or they read a book, or they sit through maybe a conference that relates to anything, but in this case, leadership, they can take monumental strides forward in their thinking. Paradigms can be busted, like you were talking about. Concepts can be understood that weren't understood before, but those paradigm shifts and those concepts require soft skills in order to pass on to other people.
That's it.
And you and I have talked about it a ton. And as you're describing those things, I'm saying, okay, if I say to someone, here's how the 3/3 process works, we can real easily go, hey, look back, look up, look forward. Here's the 10 parts of it. This is what it all looks like. And we could say, hey, loving accountability is extremely important to moving a disciple forward. But the soft skills of sitting with someone week in and week out and seeing that loving accountability actually interacting with a person in a way that's transforming for their life is a very different picture than just understanding that it should happen. How it happens, those are the people skills, those soft people skills that can only be learned by actual practice, like you're talking about.
Well, and maybe another part of that for me, Dave, is I think there is a small number out there, and I don't know what percent you'd give to it. Won't put you on the spot, but for me, maybe it's 10%, maybe it's less than that. That when they hear that kind of training, intuitively they have got enough experience with those soft skills, they can turn around and implement and pretty quickly get traction. And right. We'll often talk about looking for those guys. That's great. We should. I want to find those guys, want to serve them, help them. But there's others that are sitting there that are ready to obey. They might even be potentially super fruitful leaders. But because they don't have those developed soft skills, they're ready to go. And they've got a release now, and they even have some tools in their tool belt, but the implementation is clunky. And so we've actually got a guy right now that we're working with here in New York, and I won't tell you too many details. Where I'll leave it kind of anonymous. But he's a really faithful guy, really obedient guy. He's really putting into practice. But he's tried to start groups a couple of 3 times now, and it keeps just falling flat. And we were like, what's going on? And finally realized some of the basic skill. And first of all, he's an incredible evangelist, a gatherer, all those things. But the basic skills of like communication with somebody regularly, and how to communicate, the soft skills of getting into the conversation, from, hey, I've been sharing with you about Jesus. Do you want to come and read the Bible together? Great gatherer, right. Obedient, but those soft skills were lacking. And so just a little bit of coaching around that. And that was a couple of weeks ago. This last this last Monday, he had 4 guys that responded as
Praise the Lord.
he put that into practice. And so that's a fast story, a fast like action story. It's not always like that, but there's this dynamic that if we will help that other chunk of people in our trainings and vision casting, there's a lot of people out there that God is working in that could potentially be church planters and disciple makers.
Yeah, and those kind of skills aren't things that you're going to be able to identify and coach in an event setting, because an event setting is going to be a one-off. And a lot of times, if there's not any, right, we do our bucket training where we're going to dump the content, the information. That's where those paradigms get blown up, because you have to see, there's certain leaders that have to see the big picture before a paradigm can really be busted and reformed, because they have to know A to Z. But even still, you've got to drip it afterwards so you can figure out where those holes are. And I would even submit to you this, Mark, is that when we find those people who already have those soft skills, it's because someone, and multiple times, multiple people in their lives throughout the time of their growing up, have given them opportunities to develop those soft skills by putting them in positions of responsibility before they were really ready, but they did it in such a way. So, like, not to derail us, but that's one of the primary purposes of a dad in a family. Is a dad's responsibility is to make sure that, especially with sons, but even with daughters, but I'm dealing with my sons now, I'm putting them in positions where I'll say, that's your choice, your consequences. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm teaching them those soft skills. You have to have consequences to your actions so that you can begin to be in that crucible where leadership and what the courage that it's going to be required for them to be fathers, for them to be husbands, for them to be leaders in community, whatever they do. Those soft skills are things that I'm even working on developing them in them since they were, young boys. And now even more as they're in their later teen years, I'm really leaning in. That's there. So anytime we see a leader, there's going to be other people in their life who have given them those opportunities. So I think that there's this question of, how do we become the person who's going to help every individual grow in leadership, regardless of where they are in the spectrum of development. And the local body becomes a great way to do that leadership development and to give them those opportunities for those people skills, with one really big caveat for me. And that is that the spiritual component of character and obedience to Christ is where the cross-pollination happens, where like a truly more secular setting of just a business isn't going to necessarily put as much emphasis on the spiritual character development as what the church would. Yeah,
that's good. Say more about that.
Well, like, okay, for instance, for me in my business, I can have someone who works for me who's not a believer, and they can be a great leader, and they can be a person who is trustworthy and a person of character. But they can do those things well in their business life, but their personal life may have things that they're doing or decisions that they're making that I'm going, I don't agree with that at all. I don't think that's a good decision, but that's not something that I'm going to go into their life and start to nag at them about. If they want to talk about it, I'll be glad to. But as long as they continue to not let creep from bad decisions in their personal life affect their business life, then we can deal with those things, right? The truth, though, is that personal life always ends up creeping into business life. There's not a separation between those two. But I can have someone who isn't necessarily a follower of Jesus, and I can develop them in certain leadership skills that are going to help them move forward. But in the church, we have the opportunity to really get to the point to say, all of these leadership skills are awesome, but the landmine underneath them is going to be the character. And if you don't get a heart transformation, you're going to blow your life up eventually.
I think we're all, I know we're near the end of our episode today, but I think the other piece that I'll bring in as we end today, in terms of the No Place Left world that you Dave and I are a part of, some of the language or the way we think about that are these different roles of leadership that we see in the work. The disciple maker, the church planter, the church planting multiplier, we might call it a movement trainer, somebody who's coming from the outside and helping people get to multiplication. And then we call the strategy coordinator, right? And I think what we're talking about today is that topic of ownership. What I've gone back to in this last season has been, how do we empower that ownership? And so then that leads me back to what kind of training is going to empower that ownership. And then that leads me to examining the training process and structure that I have been rolling out. And I think what I'm processing through right now is, how do I have a training structure that helps to identify that 10%, that strategy coordinator or movement trainer, that kind of person that's going to immediately get it. Maybe they've already got some of those soft skills, but also somebody who might potentially be a church planting multiplier, a church planter that may not have those skills immediately or yet. Yeah.
Right.
And so that in terms of the strategy of this, that leads me to reverse engineer back to what kind of training does both. And so right now, just as an example of that, we're experimenting in this online training with leading out with 4 fields and big vision on the front end, but also bringing in the vision cast for abiding and oikos at the beginning. And so we're defining obedience or defining prayer and abiding, not as just a prayer time, but as God's love language is obedience. Will you obey him? And then here's your obedience step, your oikos. And then also simultaneously bringing in the big picture of 4 fields and big vision. And we're hoping that strategy will lead to grabbing a hold of both and not have us just labeled as the evangelist and training the evangelist. So I think that's the other part of this conversation, is not how do we just value the local church, but how do we think through even our event training and all of our training so that it's helping us to find the kind of leaders that it's going to take to get the job done.
And understanding that some of those leaders are going to require significant development and a season that may be longer than others to get them to the place to where those soft skills and that biblical understanding and the ownership, responsibility, desire of aspiring to this all match up. And the understanding that it's messy to get there. A lot of mistakes are going to get made, but we've got to create an environment where people have the opportunity to try, to fail, to be encouraged to try again. And in doing so, they learn those lessons that are necessary to get better and better and better at what they're doing, so that hopefully we get one day to where they become shoulder height coworkers and partners in the gospel, where we say, like to Titus, hey, I need X taken care of. Would you be able to come and help me with this, and know with full confidence and assurance that what they say would be exactly what we would want, because we trust them and know them well enough to say, yeah, trust them the way you would trust me.
Right.
In the ministry and the leadership. Two little stamps that I would put on this, Mark, is the first stamp is that the New Testament's design is the church.
Yes.
And so if we want to try to develop leaders, anytime I think we step away from the simple, reproducible biblical pattern of the New Testament, we might find that we may have some effect in certain areas, or there may be ways in which we can speed up the process, but there's always going to be inherent pitfalls that we haven't thought of, because we're getting out of the biblical model of the way in which leadership development disciples are made, and disciples are made through church. And yes, there's intense disciple to disciple making that has to occur, but that always has to go in community. And the New Testament's designed for that is the local body. And there's interactions between all of those. And so one thing just the stamp that I would put is that if the New Testament's designed for this disciple making community, this incubation process is the New Testament church, we would do well, I think, to follow that model and not try to be inventive or more effective or recreate something, because we're gonna have a pitfall we don't expect, because we don't know something that God knows, and if we try to outthink him, we won't be able to.
Dave, our whole podcast is just a long conversation of repentance, getting back to the original plan of God in the book of
Always.
Acts.
Always.
Oh man. Well, guys, I hope this was a helpful repentance episode for you as well. Love to hear from you in the comments or leave a review and let us know what you'd like to talk about or how this is impacting you. So thank you, guys. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thanks for listening, for watching. If this content has been helpful for you, please take a minute to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. It really helps us to get this content out there farther, to serve Jesus, grow his kingdom, and accomplish the Great Commission until there is no place left. Much love to you guys. See you next time.